Well, good morning. My name is Jackie Anderson, and I'm an assistant dean at the University of St. Thomas, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our weekly online learning series. Today's session is What, So What, Now What? With University of St. Thomas marketing professor Gino Giovannelli. Gino brings real-world, immediate, practical application to anything he teaches, so I'm certain it's going to be a great session today. But before I introduce Gino, I'd like to give you a chance to mark your calendar for our upcoming sessions. Now remember, next week is our bye week. It corresponds with the 4th of July holiday, so we won't be having an online learning series next week. But we return with a thought-provoking session on Wednesday, July 8th, with University of St. Thomas management professor Ernie Owens. He will be leading a meaningful discussion of diversity, inclusion, and being an ally in anti-racism. The following week, on Tuesday, July 14th, we are joined by Dr. Marcia Ballinger, and the title of her session is 9 Networking Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. Whether you are voluntarily or involuntarily looking for a new role, networking is key, and Dr. Ballinger has built one of the most successful executive search firms in the Twin Cities, so it'll be a great session. Now, I hope participating in this weekly event has provided you with some great professional development. If you're looking for more comprehensive development, as we enter the dog days of summer, as well as continue to navigate COVID-19, we are pleased to be extending a 15% discount on all class offerings in July and August. So if you haven't visited our website recently, you may want to check out, this might be the perfect time to embark on some new professional development. So with that, our plan for today, I will introduce Gino here in a moment, and he'll spend about 45 minutes on the topic of what, so what, now what. And as always, feel free to use the chat feature at any time during the presentation with any of your questions, and please direct the chat to all panelists. And we will share those questions with Gino as the presentation goes on. Now, remember, we always like to end a few minutes early so you have time for a break before your 9 o'clock meeting. So as usual, we'll wrap up by 8:50 or 8:55. And if you have any difficulty and you need to step away or technical difficulties, please know we're recording this session and it'll be made available to you by the end of the week. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Gino Giovannelli. Gino is a University of St. Thomas marketing professor in the Opus College of Business. Always a classroom favorite, Gino recently was awarded a Teaching Excellence Award just this past term. Now, prior to joining St. Thomas, Gino had a very successful career in industry. He was a vice president at the Carlson Companies before starting Miles Interactive in 2006. Now, Miles Interactive focuses on leveraging the internet for business success, particularly through digital marketing. Now, Gino has an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering from Bucknell University and has an MBA in marketing. Always an engaging speaker. I know you will have a great session. It is my pleasure and my privilege to introduce my colleague and friend, Professor Gino Giovannelli. Gino?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Tuesday morning for the session called What, So What, Now What? And you're probably wondering what's up with that phrase. That's a phrase that I like to think about whenever an opportunity presents itself or a challenge presents itself or any kind of situation where you have to sort of pause and figure out what to do. So the what is, what's going on, so what is kind of like a, how does that affect me? And then the now what is, what do I do about it? And the context for this, this talk is really making sure we have a way to get out of COVID better than we came into it. So it's going to focus around this sort of, some would say challenge, some would say opportunity that we're going to take a look at and figure out what we can do about it. Gosh, you'd have to be living under a rock to not realize kind of what's going on. It started with the COVID-19 thing earlier in the spring. Then it had a ripple effect on our economy, worst economy since the Great Depression, kind of stacked on top of COVID, which was a health issue, obviously. Then it went to an economic issue. And then most recently, unfortunately, we have the events of the last month with racial injustice. So it's kind of the trifecta, perfect storm impact kind of thing. And, you think about it from a kind of a timing perspective. You take those three scenarios or situations that have happened, in the beginning in February, first case of COVID in the US. Social distancing went into effect March 25th. April 1st, we reach 1 million cases. And unfortunately, by the 27th, we reach 100,000 deaths. And that number just keeps rising. So that's happening. Then the economic parts start layering in. The Dow Jones was at a high of 29,000. Then it took a huge drop in March. Unemployment rate then was impacted, obviously, with a huge amount of jobs lost, 30 million jobs lost by June 3rd. So it's like, oh my gosh, these two things are piling up. And then again, most recently, May 25th with the George Floyd incident. And then that sparked U.S. protests. And then now it's a worldwide thing. So gosh, this is just such a unique backdrop, if you will. So that leads us to the kind of that is definitely the what has happened. Now I'll take you into the classroom, if you will. So while all that's going on, I got to teach this spring for the first time ever a course called Marketing 430, which is the last course that our undergraduate marketing majors take at St. Thomas. It's the class that allows you to take everything you've learned in 3 years or so of classroom learning and apply it to a real business. So it's all seniors, and I put them in groups of 5, and they get assigned a real client. And the goal of this class is to take everything they learned, in 4 years or 3+ years of marketing, and basically apply it to creating a marketing strategy for a real business. So you can imagine we're humming along this semester. The students are doing industry analysis and product analysis, competitive analysis, SWOTs, everything like that for their clients, and all of a sudden, COVID hits. And I remember this day like it was yesterday. And literally I said, at one point, I'm like, hey, does anybody have any questions before we start today's class? And someone raised their hand and they said, is COVID in scope or out of scope for the assignment? And I remember when that question hit, I was just like, oh my gosh. Like, I had to think about it a little bit. I was like, wait a minute. What do we do here, right? Because basically it wipes out all the work they had done all semester and presents this new kind of what situation. And I remember thinking to them, and I said, you know what, the best thing about this class, you guys, is it's real, okay? You're taking classroom learning and you're applying it to a real business. And I said, if your clients have to deal with COVID, you have to deal with COVID. And in fact, you're gonna be the person or the team that helps them get through COVID. So I said, I want each one of you to come up with a scenario where you can help your client, your real business, deal with a real issue, okay? The biggest issue they've probably ever had to deal with. And really what it came down to, folks, 3 scenarios, okay? In some cases, the clients in this class were going to scenario 1, which in my mind, I call it hitting the pause button. And I'll explain what these mean in a second. The second scenario is a little bit of like a bridging the gap. It's like, how do you get through this and then get back on the trail and keep going, right? And the third one is kind of like oh my gosh, here's a unique opportunity. Let's reinvent the whole business. Let's take this as a situation that's going to force us to do some things we've dreamed of doing that we never had the guts or the urgency to deal with. So those were really the 3 scenarios that sort of came out of this classroom assignment that became real fast. So on the first scenario, again, I call it hitting the pause button. This is where the company basically just literally hits the pause button, stops everything, doesn't go to, shuts the store down, close everything down. And this notion of retreat, which, often has a negative connotation to it. Many of you have heard about the origins of retreat is where you actually step back and you get a vantage point of what's in front of you, and allows you to get your bearings. So it's not always a negative thing. It's a good opportunity to kind of step back and get a view of the landscape. I call it patching the holes, topping off with fluids, this notion of kind of fixing the things that are all around you while you're kind of shut down for business. It's almost like in a car race where you come in on the yellow flag and there's nobody's going to beat you at that point because nobody's really in the race anymore. Everyone's just kind of fixing their game a little bit. It allows you to rest your front line, particularly your salespeople. And then the notion that when this is over, you come out swinging because, again, you've rested your front line, you fixed all the leaks in your business, and you operationalized your business, and it's a great way to come out. So here's a couple examples of that scenario one. One of which is Punch Pizza. So about maybe 3 months ago or so, I was on a podcast with John Puckett, and he was talking about how going into COVID, they were just coming off like the best sales weekend in the history of the company, if you will. And all of a sudden this hit. And if you remember, a lot of companies at that point pivoted and went for side pickup, delivery, all that stuff. And John didn't do that, or Punch didn't do that. They basically said, you know what, we don't even want to try to do this. And one of the reasons is he was worried, literally, going right into that weekend when the governor made the announcement, is they had a scare in one of their stores that one of their employees was potentially diagnosed with COVID. So he said, I'm going to shut the whole thing down. I'm going to focus on employee safety and our guest safety. He goes, it would be terrible if I knew a guest came into our restaurant and got sick, or if one of our employees got sick. So we're just going to shut the whole thing down. And that allowed him to take that time to really look over the business, retool it, and let those frontline people just be with their families and be safe. And now he's coming out of COVID. I call it coming out swinging, like emerging better than ever, because they literally paused. But that's a scary thing because no revenue came in during that window. Okay, so that's one example, and I suspect they're going to be in a much better position when they come out. Second example, WildBum. Now this was actually one of the clients from my Marketing 430 class. WildBum makes travel guides, if you will. So when people go on vacation, that they can get information on all the things that the locals do. So they can have a really special experience. Well, the problem in COVID is all travel shut down. So it would have been really easy for WildBum to just completely shut down. And they did, in the sense of didn't really market their products to an audience that wasn't going to be traveling. But what they did is they took the opportunity, kind of while the yellow flag is out there, to not race the race, but to instead encourage their their guide architects, who are the people that write the travel guides, to go out and build out a whole new supply, or a whole new arsenal, if you will, of travel guides, so that when people, you can imagine, coming out of COVID, they're going to want to travel like crazy, right? Because they've been pent up in their houses. So now they'll have a full inventory of product to sell. So they kind of shifted their focus to their partners, okay, and away from the customers, because the customers just weren't interested in the product, okay? So that's an example of a hit the pause button, if you will. The advantages of that, well, the plus side is it gives you a chance, again, to retreat, get your perspective, figure out what needs to be fixed for the long term, and it allows you to fix things that can't easily be fixed when you're actually running the business, because sometimes it just makes sense to shut it down and fix stuff that you can't do while you're operating on a daily basis, and rest your people. The challenge on the other side, folks, is that you risk customers forgetting about you, or even the backlash of them feeling like you're sitting it out. I even thought about this with Punch. I was like, come on, guys. It's like, I'm dying for some pizza right now it's my favorite pizzeria. And now I'm Italian, so that says something there. But, it's like, oh, come on, guys. So a little bit of backlash potentially. And for the business, you're just bleeding cash. You're just bleeding cash that whole time. So that's the pluses and minuses of the hit the pause button scenario one. Okay. Jackie, how are we doing on questions? Anything coming in?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to scenario two, which I call bridging the gap. So it's like, hey, how do we figure out how to stay in business? Let's implement those changes really quickly. Let's not worry about the long-term solution here. We just got to get over this bump, if you will, and then we can go back to business as usual. Okay. An example there is one of my favorite restaurants. So this is my wife and I. And one of our favorite places to go is the Hilltop, which is at 50th and 100 over in the Edina area. They literally put up a tent in the parking lot, right? Because the restaurant's closed, and there's nobody going to park there, right? Because there's nobody going in. So they set up a tent, and they had 9 tables in the tent. And notice the table, no tablecloth, minimal, kind of, they got a hanging plant and a little shrub or something from Home Depot. Very, very bare bones, couple extension cords, reduced menu. Literally, if you can see it in the picture, right between our plates, there's a laminated thing that allows you to scan for the menu. You can order your food, minimum menu, if you will, to keep the burden on the kitchen staff light, right? Limited food options, really streamlined operation. Even when the bill comes, you guys, they put it in a glass so there's no touching of anything, right? And you see your bill through the glass, you put your credit card in there, they take it away. So they've really, really minimized the risk factor just so they can stay in business, but it's only 9 tables, right? But it allows them to make a little bit of money and stay top of mind with customers while COVID's going on. I think post-COVID, they'll go right back to, this is the hilltop that my wife and I love to experience. I mean, this is what we want to get back to. So that parking lot situation is not a long one. It's going to return to being a parking lot because they want to get the people back. So just an example of how a company can turn on a dime and stay in business to some degree. That's one example. Another one is Becker. Now, this is not my wife and I, but this is a stock picture of a showroom in a furniture store. My wife and I were in the market for some new bar stools, and so we were going to go to Becker. We went online to see when the hours were for the store, and then on the website it said appointment only. And I remember thinking, like, oh God, what a pain. Okay, well, all right, we'll figure this out. So we made an appointment, and we walk in the store, and there's virtually nobody there. There's maybe 6 or so other people like us there, and not tons of salespeople, just maybe 3 or 4. And it allowed us to buy our bar stools in a way that was just really comfortable. We had our salesperson working only with us and not getting pulled away in different directions, right? And not a lot of people you have to kind of work around in the store. I mean, when you think about it from a business model perspective, you can match your best salespeople with your best customers. Because you think about it, who makes an appointment to go to a furniture store who's not a buyer? Like, nobody would make an appointment, go in and go, just looking. I mean, we were there to buy. And the fact is, we were there to buy, and we were able to be put with their best salespeople, because maybe they have, 20 salespeople working on a Saturday. Well, today they didn't have 20; they had like 4, and I bet they were their best salespeople. So you match potentially the best salespeople with the best customers, and actually it could increase the close rate. So I'm kind of leading you to this notion that this might be a good long-term play, but I'm not sure. I have a feeling they will likely return to business as usual, but there may be a play here where one day a week they have it kind of buyer day where it's appointment only. Because I compared this to last weekend. My wife and I bought a car, and we went to a car dealership for it, and we were buyers. Again, we're spending money like drunken sailors right now. But anyway, bought new furniture, bought a new car. Anyway, we went in there, and we're working with a salesperson who kept getting pulled away in different directions, and get this key to that person, and pull that car up, and and we kept having this situations where we could easily leave. And we were patient, we stayed with the salesperson. But the point being, if it had been back to Becker, we would have been more likely to buy. And we ended up buying the car. But there were 3 or 4 times where we were going to leave because it was just so chaotic. And we were kind of spoiled by the Becker experience. So we'll see if they return or not. So pros and cons of this approach. On the plus side, you're at least able to generate some revenue during COVID, right? And to some degree, implementing short-term remedies are a lot easier and faster to do. Like that notion back to the Hilltop restaurant. Slapped up a tent, got some flowers, put some lights up, 2 extension cords, and you're in business, right? So you can do that quickly when you don't have to plan it for forever or have to have it be something that's sustainable. And you also don't mess up your core business, right? The downside, minimal payoff for the changes that you've made. Also, we don't know how long this is going to be. So let's say, they've implemented these short-term solutions that aren't really short-term, and now you have to sort of live with them and operationalize them, and you didn't really think you might have to do that. So not knowing when this is over is going to be hard. And also it might be confusing. Like when I go back to Becker and it's chaos, I'm going to be like, hey, I want it the way it was when it was just like a VIP buying experience. So anyway, or even at the Hilltop, I kind of liked eating outside. Well, that's not going to happen when they go back inside. So a little bit of a confusion of what the brand is, if you will, and how it's delivered. Jackie, anything?
Yeah, actually, there was one that just came in.
Cool. Let's do it.
It says, what if I hit the pause button and get leapfrogged? Design thinking demands agile testing. How
Yep.
do I recover?
Yeah, that is the downside. Is you're not top of mind, and there could be some resentment, and people find that new restaurant. It's like, when Punch closed, you might try Savoy, you might try Broder's, and you go, hey, this is as good, if not better. I'm kind of done. So that's a risk. That's a risk. So that one, the hitting the pause button is I think a pretty unique situation where you literally close shop. I think most of my clients that from my Marketing 430 class were smaller clients, even nonprofits, and that might be an easier thing to do for them than bigger companies. So the question that they raise is totally valid. It's a reason to not do it, honestly, because you can be and will be leapfrog. The only good news is that you could leapfrog again coming out of it, because you had that chance to sort of, you bring your car in off the track, you adjust the brakes, you adjust the fins, you tweak your whatever, and you could come out faster because you took the time to exit the game. That would be the only counter strategy, is that, go ahead and leapfrog me, because guess what? I'm going to leapfrog you.
Okay, so even in the pause, they're still innovating. They may not be testing agile out with the customer, but they're still innovating.
For sure. In fact, that's what John Puckett was saying from Punch. He was saying, while we were not open, trust me. He goes, in fact, he said, I've never been busier. Trying to re-engineer the company and how to figure out whether I should ever do takeout or carry out or whatever it is, or curbside, and really, rather than just knee jerk and just start doing it, right, with little posters and handwritten notes on the wall, come at this hour to this hour. And I mean, you've seen how companies have sort of done this bridge the gap thing. Hitting the pause button might allow you to take a better look at the business and make tweaks. And we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about there are some really good things you can do to re-engineer your business during the pause button, because you don't have to run the business at the same time. You're not working on the plane while you're flying the plane.
One more question, and again, I don't know if you answer it now or later in the presentation. Why aren't creditors for these businesses being mandated by the government to provide COVID debt relief and push back on their loans until they achieve legitimate revenue streams again?
I don't think I am qualified to answer that question. But what I will say is that in the John Puckett podcast, he mentioned that became most of his job, was getting the money out of the banks that they were deserved. And that's almost like a full-time job, if you will. But I can't speak to how to make that go any easier, or why isn't that being regulated or anything like that. I can't honestly speak to that.
All right, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the third scenario is sort of the hybrid. It's you identify new business models, right, while you're in business, to figure out how to come out of COVID, and not just limping along, but now reinvented, if you will. So you're balancing the short-term needs and the long-term needs at the same time. And you're doing a lot of investment in infrastructure, and I'll get into some of the different things you're doing here, but you're reinventing how your whole business is being delivered. In other words, you almost have the gun to your head because of COVID, and now you're trying to figure out, like, you know what? We've been talking about all this stuff, doing all these things someday in the future. Well, guess what? The future is now. So let's do it. And the ability to scale it, because you have to live with it after COVID. You're not going to go back like the Hilltop restaurant and go back to business as usual. You're going to try to keep both the things you're doing during COVID and your existing business going forward. So you're going to try to ride two horses at the same time. So it's really challenging. I'll give you a couple examples. Schuler Shoes, which is right around the corner from my house. What's their unique differentiator? Well, they are experts in footwear. They're all about the store experience. When you go in there, it's definitely people working there that know footwear. They know the technology. That's their thing, which is awesome until your store closes and you're forced to close. And now your differentiator is gone, if you will. In fact, the stores drove the vast majority of sales, almost all of it, if you will. And when the stores closed, they had to figure out how to do online sales, something they've always dreamed of doing. But again, it's like when you have enough of your business coming in the traditional way, sometimes it's hard to think about moving to that new place because you're getting a good base of business from the kind of the traditional way. So they've been wanting to go in that direction. I remember talking to the VP of marketing literally on my lunch hour, going like, how do I turn this into an online sales situation? I'm like, oh my gosh, when do you have to do this? She's like, right now, the stores are shut down. I have nothing coming in. So they were able to actually figure out how to drive sales online. So they know they can do it, which is a huge learning, if you will. And they were actually able to attract that younger demographic, because that's the other part of the business. Is the problem is it's an older clientele that only come in the store. Now they have an online channel for younger people. So they were able to get to where they wanted to get to, I would think years ahead, because they honestly had to. And now they're poised for more growth because they're going to have a balanced attack. They're going to have in-store sales and they're going to have online sales. And they know they can do it because they had to do it. Okay. Caribou. I was a consultant for Caribou for, over 10 years. And I remember they had the brick and mortar stores and they had the e-commerce website. And the two, there was no really overlap, this notion of going online and ordering and then picking up at stores, or going online and ordering and have it delivered to your house, and things like that. This COVID situation forced them to expand the order ahead so that you could either pick it up at drive-through window or in store. They now offer curbside service. They never offered that before. They offer Caribou delivery, never offered it before. They even created a partnership with Uber Eats. And like, who ever thought that you'd use a Uber Eats to get coffee, right? Or like, a muffin or whatever it is. But they did all these things because they kind of had to. And maybe it was part of the 5-year plan, but again, that becomes the 5-week plan real quick, right? And I think they're going to stay with, the last I checked with one of the people that works there, it's one of our teachers in exec ed, she was saying, hey, we have new ways of delivering that we never had before, so we can reach more customers and generate more revenue. Why would we ever walk away from that? So that's not a bridge the gap, that's a reinvent the business. Last example on this one is good old St. Thomas. We had the same situation where we were dreaming of or feeling the need to offer an online teaching experience. And I remember when they first talked to me about it, like, hey, how do you feel about creating an online version of all your courses? And I remember kind of going like, I'd like to just keep teaching face-to-face. And they're like, but here are the advantages of going online. And I'm like, I get that, but I'd still like to teach face-to-face. And finally, I'm like, hey, are you asking me or are you telling me? And they're kind of like, we're telling you because we feel like we need to offer that at some point to be competitive and to be able to offer courses the way students want to take them, in person, face-to-face, or online. And I tell you, we had from, March 13th, we were told everything has to move online. And by March 16th, we were online. So 3 days, 72 hours. And I think we were able to leapfrog, if you will, what we had planned to do over years time. And it's a little bit of that burning the ships. You can't go back because COVID doesn't let you go back. And you're forced to just take this on and go. And we did it. And we're pretty proud of what we did. So now we can offer customers or students more choices. Has it been uncomfortable for us? Yep. But that's what we got to do. So that's the third example. And now we're in a position to offer classes, fortunately, in the fall, online or face-to-face or whatever the decisions that are made, but we're in a position to be able to do that. Okay. Positives and negatives on this one. Positives, you're able to identify and test out new ways of doing business for life after COVID, if you will, and you're using the COVID time to kind of test these things out. You're taking a long-term approach, and that helps you really set yourself up to be more scalable. Okay, rather than that bridge the gap, which kind of says, you know what, in 8 weeks, we're going to rip these tents down, get the extension cords wrapped up, and we'll go back inside. This allows you to have something that's sustainable and leverageable and scalable, right? And it actually, again, to the third bullet, helps you accelerate your infrastructure initiatives to just push those through. The downside, you got to balance the short term and the long term, right? So Caribou still needed to offer drinks, the old way, as well as now offer all these new delivery options, right? You're trying to do both at the same time. It's definitely harder to implement a solution that has to live over time. and be scalable and sustainable. So it's not just a quick fix, kind of MacGyver kind of approach. And you're taking on major infrastructure type projects while you're already stressed out in terms of your staff and your, and even your partners, right? So you're taking on a lot, right? But there's all the pros of it. So Jackie, how are we doing?
You're doing great. Keep going.
Okay, I'm going to keep blasting away. So we're through the what and the so what, and now we get to the now what. How do we get there, if you will? We have these three scenarios. I'm going to take the last part of the presentation is about that. And the first step is to embrace technology, and I'll go through what that means in a second. Then consider the options you have available, make some really tough decisions, and then create a plan to get there. Okay, so all of these four things need to happen. And I really think regardless of the scenario, technology is going to come into play. You look at digital transformation, which is basically how do companies leverage digital technology, capabilities, whatever you want to call it, to change how we market, sell, and deliver products. For sure, digital transformation is going to be in play, regardless if it's scenario 1, scenario 2, or scenario 3 that we just outlined, okay? Here's the interesting thing about digital transformation. 87% of companies feel like digital transformation is a major, critical, competitive opportunity that we need to embrace, if you will. And as a result of that, 88% of companies say that they're undergoing a digital transformation. Okay? But here's the bugger, you guys. Only 25% have a clear understanding of what the heck does that mean and how to get there. Because that's the hard part. It's easy to say you're on a digital transformation, that you're changing your business to deliver products in new ways or whatever it is. How do you get there is a different story. So what I think needs to happen next is that you need to consider options, lots of them, okay? So, and I think digital transformation type projects fall into two categories. There's infrastructure type projects like, hey, here's a chance to overhaul our website and offer some e-commerce capability in there to allow people to order online, like the Schuler Shoes kind of thing, right? Hey, this is an opportunity to implement a new CRM platform. Let's get our email automation set up. Let's set up our campaigns. Like, those are examples of things that you could take on to change how you do your business because of what's COVID is doing to your business. Maybe you overhaul all your point of sale systems and all your store, whatever it is, right? That's one big category. The other big category of projects are the customer-facing ones. It's basically, hey, how do you, for example, in the store, do we allow self-checkout so that people don't have to go up to a cash register? You take the product off the shelf with an app, you scan it, and then you just literally walk out of the store. Minimal interaction that keeps the safety in play, or curbside pickup, or appointment only. These kinds of things, they're projects. They have to be dealt with, right? Or even the buy online, pick up at store kind of thing. So major projects, not to be underestimated in terms of how difficult they might be, but the good news is they're exciting. They're game changer opportunities, which leads us to our next area. Is we want to identify opportunities in each one of these different areas that I just outlined. So from an e-commerce perspective, we might want to allow people to order without a profile and blah, 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 or other choices. For delivery, we might want to be able to offer curbside or order online pickup at store. Whatever these things are, we need a vast list of opportunities before we decide which ones we should do. That's one of the challenges here with digital transformation. A lot of companies immediately jump on one thing that they need to do, and they don't really consider the full variety of things that they should at least consider, right? And that's what this part is about, identifying tons of different opportunities. Self-checkout, right? With a kiosk or an app or whatever it is. So these are major projects, and we need to brainstorm them so that we have
Gino, there's a question that just came in related to that, and I think you might be answering it, but let me make sure I get it out.
Sure.
How do you recommend organizations generate these ideas for change to their infrastructure and customer touch points? How do you know what should be in scope and out of scope?
Good. Well, forget about in scope and out of scope. I think the first part we got to do, Jackie, is get the list, right? And I always say brainstorm to the ends of the earth, right? And then prioritize very dramatically. In other words, come up with any idea possible, and I'll tell you how we do that, and then cut it very dramatically to just the best ones, because not every idea is a good idea. Or some of the good ideas are good, but they're not great. We'll get to that in a second. But in terms of coming up with a high quantity of ideas, I usually, in a brainstorming session, will invite everybody that I can get. Like a lot of times you'll think, oh, because it's customer facing, let's just invite customer service and maybe the salespeople and maybe the marketing people. Or if it's infrastructure, hey, let's just invite IT, right? I think we should invite everybody in the business to at least throw ideas out. Because again, two reasons. One is, maybe some of the people in ops and supply chain or HR, they have some ideas you never thought of, right? So let's get more voices at the table. We're just brainstorming now, so we're not going to do any of these things necessarily. We're just going to brainstorm them. The other one is you want those people at the table, particularly IT and ops, because when you implement this stuff, you're going to need their help, and you want them to have had a voice in coming up with the punch list, so that when you ask them, here's what you need to do to help us, they go, where'd you get these ideas from? It's like, your person was in the table, and actually this idea may have come from their table, whatever it is. So lots of brainstorming, lots of different people, okay, to get a big list, right? Then here's the tough part. And this is, I don't think it's hard for companies to brainstorm, honestly. It's usually kind of a fun activity, and you get to kind of stop doing what you do every day and kind of get in a room and start dreaming about the future, right? Here's where I think it falls right on its face, is the ability to make those tough decisions of, in brainstorming, every idea is a good idea. Well, it is during the brainstorming session. At some point, we got to weed out the great from the good. And so my thought here is, what I do is I use two criteria, impact and burden. So we evaluate every opportunity that was brainstormed based on these two factors. And these two factors they have a lot in them, if you will. Like impact, does it drive revenue? Does it save us money? Does it help our brand's perception in the marketplace? Does it help the goodwill of our company grow? Does it make customers happy? Those kinds of things. It's a measure of how good would this be for us to take this on. Burden is, how much of a nightmare is it going to be to take this on? How much is it going to cost? How complex is it? It might not be costly or complicated, but it's contingent on something else. And therefore, there's a burden because of its association with another project that has to happen first, or the amount of time it's going to take, or whether you have the resources, or if you have influence over the resources. Those are burden points. And so what we do, we go back to the brainstorming list, okay, that we have for all those big areas of opportunity. And if you notice in the right two columns, folks, we're going to assess an impact score and a burden score. And normally I try to get the most senior ranking business person to comment on the impact. So the ability to, let's say for the first one, for the e-commerce, for the website, we want to offer the ability to order without a profile. Someone on the business might say, you know what, we have huge dropout rates on our current e-commerce because we make people create a profile and a username and a password, and I remember my password questions, and I remember my password question answers. We're losing a disproportionate number of people because we make everybody create a profile. And then we go to the IT guys and say, hey, how hard is this going to be to implement? And maybe they say it's a 3 because now there's something that we can private label and we can just use, and it's cheaper than it was before. So maybe the burden's only a 3. So it's a scale of 1 to 10. 10's high, 1's low, and they score each opportunity. And by the way, don't take any of these scores with any of these examples. I just kind of put this together for the purposes of this presentation. So by the way, ordering without a profile is probably harder than a 3. Go ahead, Jackie.
And Gino, related to data, without some sort of data collection and analytics, how does the business know what the best solution is for their business?
In terms of, all I need them to do right now, Jackie, is to score an impact score and a burden score, okay? And here's what might rub some people the wrong way, is I need these numbers. I sit down with like a CMO and a CIO, and we blast through 80 items in about 2 hours, and we score them. And you might go like, well, how do you, without all the analytics and all the research, and we need a team to run off and come back with a burden score. It's like, no teams run off and come back with a burden score. What's your best assessment? I just want you to be directionally correct. Is it a 3, or does it feel more like a 5, or somewhere in the middle? Somewhere in the middle, 4. The point is, We want to be directionally correct here so that we can execute quickly. Because if we spend 6 months figuring out how to get through COVID and we're out of COVID in 5 months, hello, right? We missed the whole window, right? So I kind of force this to happen. And this is why when you go to a brainstorming session, everybody feels awesome about it. They high-five each other. And then somebody at the end of the meeting says, hey, someone will be back to you with what we're going to do. And then most times, nobody gets back to you. The reason that nobody gets back to you with the list of things we're going to do or not do is because they don't go through this step. And they don't go through this step because this is a hard step. Because everybody wants to assign their teams to go out and come back with an impact score and a burden score that is accurate. Okay, great, it's accurate. But if it takes 3 weeks to come back and you have 80 things to evaluate, that stops it dead in the tracks. So my approach, right or wrong, is I just ask for a directionally correct number, right, for all of these opportunities across all of these major initiatives. And where I'm getting to is this prioritization matrix. And some of you may have kind of sensed that this was coming, the old four-boxer, if you will. Left side is impact, low to high, 0 to 10. And the x-axis is burden, low to high. So that quadrant 1 stuff, you guys, high impact, low burden, that is just grab it and just do it, right? Quadrant 2, high impact, but it's high burden. That's where a lot of your high impact stuff is going to land because the highest impact things tend to be the hardest to do, right? The point is you're going to probably want to be looking at quadrant 1 and 2. Quadrant 3 and 4, like 3 is low impact, low burden. It's kind of busy work. It's easy to do, but it doesn't move the needle. And for sure, quadrant 4 you want to stay away from because it's low impact and it's hard to do. It's like, oh my gosh, why would we ever do that? And if you layer on those point values that we saw, okay, now every idea that brainstormed wasn't exactly the best idea. Some of them are really good and some of them are just okay. And we don't have time to do the okay. Chances are we don't have the resources to do all these things, nor do we ever want to. So the point is, and just so you're wondering, where do all these colors and numbers come from? Go back to the table that I kind of showed where, hey, there's that ability to order without a profile, the 8-3. Well, that blue number 1 is 8-3, and there it is up in quadrant 1. Or opportunity number 2, the fully customizable order kind of thing. Well, that scored a 6-6. It's harder to do than number 1, and it has a lower impact because maybe not a lot of people need to order custom options, if you will. So that's a 6-6. Anyway, that's kind of how it maps out. And then you can go through, and one of the methods is you basically take everything below an impact of maybe 5 or so and just cut it, if you will. Or you might, another approach is where you look at the different category. Maybe all of those CRM improvements, some of those red ones, some of them are high in impact, and some of them are low in impact, but they're all hard to do. Maybe now's not the time to do that because it's all hard. So you might just cut the whole category out versus 1 or 2 things from each category. That's called prioritization. That's the tough part, you guys. Okay. So going back to, and we're kind of wrapping up here, but going back to those 3 scenarios. Number 1, pause. Don't do anything. Retool the business while you're not trying to run the business at the same time. Scenario 2, bridge the gap. Just those short, quick fixes to get us through, right? And then you're going to go back to business as usual. Reinvent the business, which is where you're doing on the massive infrastructure redesigns while you're running the business at the same time. So does anybody want to guess if you had to overlay the hit the pause button, scenario 1, where would that be, right? You can do major things when the company's resting, if you will, from an operations perspective. I think you'd probably want to be playing right there between quadrant 1 and 2. You want for sure you want anything that's high impact, but you probably want to have it medium burden because, well, why wouldn't you take on all the high burden stuff? The problem there is if you take on that high burden stuff, you might not be able to reopen for business anytime soon because you've got these massive projects going with no cash coming in. So I think I would play toward the middle of quadrant 1 and 2 if you're in scenario 1, which is the pause, okay? If you are in scenario 2, which is short-term, quick hit kind of things to get us through the storm until the storm's over, then we go back to business as usual. Again, back to Hilltop. Hey, somebody rent a damn tent, get a couple extension cords. Let's get a little menu with a QR code that has like 1/10 of things on the menu. Let's figure out how to really just get this place up and running. Where do you think that would land? For sure, you want high impact, but on the burden side, you don't want it to be high burden because you want to get that tent up and running in 3 days kind of thing. So I think you want to kind of play over here to the left. Low burden, high impact. Third scenario. This is when you reinvent your business. This is going to be tricky. This is going to be the hard stuff, okay? But you're setting yourself up for the future. This is Caribou investing in delivery services and drive-throughs and all those kinds of things, right? Reinventing the business altogether. Where do you think that's going to land? Probably out here to the right. It's the highest of impact, highest of burden, because you're sort of reinventing the business altogether. It's not a Band-Aid, right? And you're kind of doubling down for the future. So this kind of helps you figure out, based on what scenario you're in, which opportunities make the most sense to grab. For sure, you don't want to grab anything in the lower hemisphere because that's all low impact, even if it's easy to do, like that purple 2, 3, and 4. Easy to do, probably not worth it. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful. The last thing is to create the plan. So you've done the hard part at this point. Now scheduling of when you're going to do all these things, and it's almost like making a dinner where you're going to boil the water. While you're boiling the water, you're going to shuck the corn so that when the corn is shucked, you throw it in the boiling water rather than start boiling it after you shuck it. It's like all that scheduling kind of stuff. That's not hard. That, I call that, plan the work the plan. Where you kind of have, when am I going to prep it? When's it going to launch? When's it going to be live for every activity I'm trying to do? And this was back to Marketing 430 for my class. All my teams had to create a COVID plan for their clients. Notice it starts in June, right? And so certain things they need to do. So, and most of it's done by the fall because that's the window, right? But you got to make sure that things are in a cadence that makes sense. You want to make sure you're not burning out your resources. So you want to stagger some work that doesn't need to be done at the same time, right? If Jackie has to do 3 things, maybe we don't give her all 3 of those things in the same month. Stagger it a little bit for her, especially if we don't need them all done next month. And so plan the work the plan. Now, here comes the challenge, is you've got to be willing to modify, right? Because one thing we know is change is inevitable. In fact, I think this is coming up on one of my last slides, is expect change. As much as we want to plan the work the plan, we've got to be ready for the next one, if you will. Okay, expecting change. The most successful companies do, and you might be going like, well, this is really timely. We're kind of hopefully coming out of COVID. Boy, this is that once in a lifetime. We'll never have to deal with this again. Well, I don't think so, guys. I mean, if you just do some quick History 101 stuff, we've had some bad stuff happen over the last 20 years. You got .com crash, 9/11, 2008 recession, 2016 recession, COVID. You had a war in there, right? Expect change. So while it's important to plan, sometimes we get too handcuffed by our plans and we bag the plan. Okay, so that's the last little bit on plan the work, is also expect that you can't just run the plan. Notice that marketing plan that I had was only 6 months long. Okay, because it's probably going to change after maybe 2 months or 3 months or so. And I think my last slide, going to go back to Ben Franklin here. When you're finished changing, you're finished, and change is the only constant in life. One's ability to adapt to those changes will ultimately determine your success. So again, getting to the planning thing is you got to be willing to adjust, because the now what's going to happen again real soon. So I'm gonna pause there. We're at 8:49.
All right.
What do we got, Jackie?
Well, first of all, thank you, Gino. Always a fascinating way of how to think about these challenges. I do have a couple more questions if you're game.
Yeah, I love it. Do it.
All right. And some of them are more industry specific. So I'll let you take these where you can. Okay. What do you expect of mass, club, and grocery stores after COVID-19? Clearly, we expect order delivery and pickup to stay in demand. Do you anticipate anything else?
Maybe it's that whole self-checkout where you're going through the store and you're able to sort of, it's funny, when you're in a big store, you can sort of, with your cart, kind of drive where you want to go. You see an aisle that's too crowded, you might go on to the next row, right? The bottleneck is checkout. Everyone has to go through the dang checkout lines, right? And as much as they have the plexiglass in front, so there is technology where if you grab a product off the shelf and you put it in your cart, your app will note that you have put that in your cart, and you just roll right out. Like if you go to an Apple store and you just want to buy an adapter cable, or you want to buy earbuds or whatever, you can literally just take it off the shelf and with the app scan it and just walk out of the store. So you don't have to have any interaction with the staff. And so I think in grocery, yeah, obviously curbside pickup or delivery is going to be a play. For the people that still want to grab the orange that they're getting, because the produce is like, I don't want someone here's how I like my bananas, right? You should be able to grab your own stuff, but then not have to go through the bottleneck of checkout potentially is one way in grocery. What were the other industries they need?
Well, I had another question come in around academia, but anything else on grocery before I go to the next question?
For me, no. Or maybe the website where it allows you to say, I like my bananas a little bit green and I like my avocados a little bit whatever. I mean, where you can, if you're someone's gonna pick your own food, that you can put in not just avocados, but I want certain size, certain ripe, whatever. I've seen that where people can, on a scale of 1 to 10. Yeah, some of that stuff. Again, technology, right?
Yep. Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next question, I have a personal favorite to this one. You were in industry and now you're in academia. Academia has embedded barriers, and I currently have a child going to college.
Academia has embedded what?
Barriers.
Oh, yeah.
I currently have a child in college. How will academia change or be forced to change?
Because the assumption is it's not changing as fast, or it doesn't have a pulse on what's going on.
Yep, I think so.
Okay. Well, I guess the first thing I will say is one of the reasons I love teaching at St. Thomas is because I'm considered a clinical faculty member, which means there's 2 tracks. There's a tenure track where you do research and you teach. There's another track called clinical where you work in industry. So I still have my consulting business, and that's where I learn. And I'm able to bring that into the classroom. So while I'm teaching, I have client work that I have to do. And a lot of times I make that the part of my day. I start off with, hey, who wants to know what's going on with, like I was a consultant for Caribou for 10 years or so. Or I worked on the Super Bowl website. I'd start with class off with hey, who wants to know what's going on with the Super Bowl? Everyone raises their hands. So I'm able to bring in examples like, hey, how are we selling the suites in the stadium for the Super Bowl? Are we using Google AdWords? Are we using email? Who are we emailing those to? How are we doing this effectively? I'm able to take real examples from real clients and make that part of my course. I don't teach from any book, no textbook. It's all real world thing. So to answer the question, at least for me, what I do is because I'm lucky enough to be a clinical faculty member, I have my pulse on what's going on. And I still have my business. And it's really, trust me, that's scenario 2 where I'm teaching while I am working. And it's definitely challenging because I got to do 2 things at the same time. And I have a client that calls me in the middle of a 90-minute class with students, and I got to go, hey, I got to take this call. No, better yet, let's take it together. I want you to hear what my client is asking of me today. And then I want someone to come up and help me do whatever they want me to do, whether it's sending out an email, buying a keyword, shutting down a campaign, making a change on the website. So that's how we do it.
Great. Thank you.
That's how I do it.
I've got one last question before we wrap today. Yeah. It says, so we've spent today talking about organizational strategies. What if I am in the workforce supporting one of these organizational strategies? What can I do to bring my personal best?
Oh, wow. Okay, so one is a human factor is be the most positive person you can be. It's amazing. I used to work with a guy every day. I'd say, hey, Mike, how you doing? He'd go, loving life. And I remember it always made me start the day just a little bit more positive. I know it might sound a little squishy for everybody, but just know that people are stressed out all the time, whether it's a work-related thing or it's a family-related thing or it's a both kind of thing. And the more you can be willing to be positive and lift each other up, somebody had a quote that said, like, you don't have to be the leader to be a leader. And I can't remember who said it, but I think it was Mark Cuban. And I loved it because it's so true. Like, we kind of, the rank and file, we just kind of hope our leadership's going to figure it out kind of stuff. And I think we all, Jackie, play a role to be a leader, whether we are the leader or not. And maybe the last thing, just a little bit more practical, is this notion of dreaming big. And you can't get to a place unless you see the place. And if we're in our foxholes, just kind of shooting over the top, and all of a sudden something like a COVID happens and we look out of our foxhole, we're like, where'd everybody go? Where'd everybody go? When did everybody shift to a different battlefield? It's like, sometimes we got to pop ourselves out. And that's why that retreat, that scenario 1, hit the pause button. Retreat's not a bad word. As a teacher, I get to do it every June and every January, where I get to stop teaching and pop up and go like, what has happened while I've been in the classroom? And we have it as work, work as a workforce. We're in our foxholes every day, dealing with 200 emails. You know what? Sometimes we just got to pop out and go, what is happening? Do people want to do curbside? Do people want to do this? What would I want if I were our customer? So that's what I would do.
Well, thank you. That's the perfect note to end on. I want to thank you, Gino, for joining us today. And as promised to everyone who's been on, we will be sending out a link to the video and the presentation. We hope you've enjoyed today's session. And as I mentioned earlier, we're off next week, but we'll be returning strong on Wednesday, July 8th, with Professor Ernie Owens and his dialogue in being an anti-racism ally. And as a reminder, our courses are virtual, and we are offering a special discount in July and August if you want to take some time to retool. Thanks for joining us today. Stay safe, stay well, and we hope to see you at St. Thomas.
Thank you.
Thanks.